were not technologists by any stretch of the imagination. We needed to find the best CTO or technology person that we could, first of all, that we could afford. Then we met Dave. He was super expensive.
So how did you address the affordability gap in the early years?
I remember talking and getting counsel from my chairman at the time, and he just like, Dov, you got to find the best people.
Yeah.
And it was a 5-minute conversation. And I went back to Dave and I said, right, you're him.
You don't build a company. You build a team and they build a company. But the constraint you hit is, you have the team often that you can afford rather than one you need. Those who build great companies, they know that the ultimate throttle for growth, it's not your product, it's not your market, it's not your capital, it's not your innovation, it's top talent. And I think that is where AI brings something truly revolutionary to the table. Hello and welcome to the Founders at Work podcast, where we dive into real stories with real founders, testing timeless principles and also sharing AI leverage for scaling in the age of AI. With me today is our first guest, Dov Gurnan, founder of Merchant Capital. I'll introduce him in a moment. I'm your host, Jason, author of Art of Scale and 20-year veteran of scaling edge growth and Art of Scale and a few other ventures. And I love helping founders scale. And we're here today to talk about one of South Africa's success stories. Dov has also been through the ups and downs many of us have, but he's got a lot of wisdom to share on how to scale. So I look forward to getting into your story today. Dov, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jace. Great to be here.
Great. So Dov, let's set the scene. Let's give the audience a sense of the kind of business Merchant Capital is. Give us a couple of battle stats, some numbers to get a picture of Merchant Capital.
Yeah, sure. So Merchant Capital, we started just over 13 years ago. So I often say it's taken 13 years to create an overnight success,
Yeah.
which I'm sure you've heard before.
And lived.
Yeah, exactly. And really the founding principle was, how do we help entrepreneurs such as myself and my co-founder at the time who are looking for growth capital to help grow their business? And kind of fast forward 13 years, that's still what we do all day, every day. So we fund unsecured working capital as growth capital to small businesses here in South Africa. We have deployed off our own balance sheet now north of 15 billion rand.
Wow.
To around 60, maybe 65,000 small businesses. So
Amazing.
As you can imagine, the impact and the ripple effect has been pretty breathtaking.
Huge.
And it feels like we're just getting started.
Yeah, well done. Okay, now tell us a bit about Dov, your story and your founding story for Merchant Capital. Why?
Yeah, so born and bred in South Africa, spent about 5 or 6 years living in London after my university days, but always had this insatiable pull to come back to South Africa and do something here and really make an impact and create an impact. And, as I said in my intro, my co-founder Daniel and myself, being serial entrepreneurs before starting Merchant Capital ourselves, we kind of had experienced the real pain points of small businesses not having access to growth capital, specifically in the early stages of business. You'll find that once businesses are more mature and they have sufficient profitability and revenue and collateral, that's when the big banks and other financial institutions are willing to lend to them. But it's actually in the early days, in the early startup, early stage growth days, that those businesses need the working capital. So the business was founded, we say, I think on our website, I'm not sure if it's still there, but it was founded by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. And it really was to help be the catalyst for growth for small businesses, to help grow them and prosper here in South Africa.
Amazing. So we share that actually. We both built companies that help other founders scale their companies with capital. And in our case, also other support. So tell us a bit about the early years. And in particular, I love the story about like how you've grown leadership teams around you. So tell us about your early days and how you thought about building a team in those early years.
Yeah, I think in the early days, as you will know, Jace, it's kind of just you hustling, every single day you're at war, you're in the trenches, as the leadership team, you're doing everything. Yeah. From, being the CEO, the psychologist, head of HR to making coffee. And it's pretty fun, actually. And I think in those early days, it's also about not having much to lose. So if you kind of look back, it's fun in the sense that when you're a bigger business, you're kind of thinking about downside risk management, which is important, but not as fun as in the early days. And I think really, one of the secrets to our success, at least, and I would imagine it's pretty consistent around other successful businesses, is having a leadership team that is diverse and that really complements the skills and strengths and weaknesses of your other leadership team. And very difficult to ascertain what that looks like in the beginning. But I think as a leader, being able to be super honest with yourself as to where you think your skills are, but where your blind spots are, and finding, colleagues or partners that can actually help fill those blind spots is the recipe for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the Jim Collins quote. Those who build great companies, they know that the ultimate throttle for growth, it's not your product, it's not your market, it's not your capital, it's not your innovation. It's the rate at which you get and keep top talent. That's the ultimate throttle on growth. And I couldn't agree more. But of course, that's hard when you can't afford to pay what Google and Goldman Sachs and McKinsey and all the other guys competing for that top talent, when you can't afford to pay what they do. So how did you address the affordability gap in the early years?
Yeah, it's such an interesting one. In the early days, when Dan and I started the business, at least personally, I was in the fortunate position that I had made a little bit of money and I had some personal balance sheet. It wasn't a lot. I remember saying to my wife before, she wasn't my wife at the time, she's now my wife, but before we started the business, to say, I have a year's worth of runway.
Right.
So we can give this a go. I don't need to pull a salary for 12 months. We don't have any debt or a bond or whatever it is. But when that runs out, that runs out. I'm then going to need to get a job. And at the time, she was doing her articles. So she was getting paid peanuts. It wasn't like we could rely on her salary. She obviously then became a lawyer and things changed. But it was, having that ability to take a view, take some risk. And in the early days, not be so obsessed around pulling a salary, I think personally was a big thing for me. Yeah. And the first 18 months of Merchant Capital, Dan and I did not pull salaries. And we essentially bootstrapped the business. Everything, any bit of revenue that came into the business, we just plowed back into the business. And I think that we were fortunate, because not everybody has that opportunity. We were fortunate enough that we could do that. And that really helped us get the business off the ground. Then once we started looking at hiring the rest of the leadership team, those conversations obviously needed to change, because not everybody that we hired was in the same financial position that perhaps we were in the early days.
And I mean, that obviously you're able to get great, relatively green talent that boxes above weight. And that's what great founders are good at, spotting great talent. But often, we hear founders saying, like, I'm taking pain in many areas because really I have the team I can afford rather than the team that I need. Yet I can't afford the one I need. How did that constraint start showing itself up in your business?
I think it's also the chicken. It's the legendary chicken and egg situation, because you almost need traction in the business to attract the right people. Because if you've got a talented leader who you're trying to convince to come to your business, it's one thing selling him or her on the story. It's another thing, being able to give them some security and kind of job security and some sustainability. So you need the traction, you need the runs on the board, but you actually need those people to help you get the traction and runs on the board. So it was an incredibly difficult balancing act, which I think everybody who's built a successful business will be able to resonate with. And, we'll kind of get to in a minute where we made our first big hire, but it was really about holding out and managing as long as we could on a bootstrap basis to get the business to a point where we could actually start having conversations with leaders who would need to be paid close or very close to kind of what market-related salaries look like.
So those words holding out, they such like loaded words, because they say like a lot was going right, but you could feel the pain and you could feel the need for a shift, but you just needed to hold on until you got to that, that breakthrough level. So what I'm hearing is, and we've talked about this before, young talented team, but green, Merchant Capital young, making meters in the market, and you're trying to get to the point where you've got a compelling enough story to now attract more senior leadership. Is that about it?
That's exactly right. So just to kind of double click into that. So when we started the business, and I've said this before, from day one, I called ourselves a fintech.
Yeah.
And, you had to, right? If you weren't a fintech, it's like having a conversation today and not talking about AI, right? Totally. You have to be called a fintech. The truth is, and I'm unashamed to admit this, for the first 4 to 5 years, we were fin.
You were fin.
No tech.
Yeah.
Everything was done on the back of an Excel spreadsheet, and it worked.
The Wizard of Oz machine, right?
Exactly. Exactly, but it worked. So we were fintech just without the fin, without the tech, sorry. But then I realized that now we actually need to grow up and become a true fintech. And that is when we went out into the market and said, Dan and myself were more business people and entrepreneurs. We were not technologists by any stretch of the imagination. And we knew we needed to find the best CTO or technology person that we could, first of all, that we could afford, but at the same time, that could really help scale and kind of create this real fintech business and have a tech-enabled business.
Was that your first senior leadership hire beyond the founding team?
Absolutely. It's
a painful step, isn't it?
Yeah, it was not easy.
Yeah.
I remember having sleepless nights, but then we met Dave, and I remember meeting him, and I thought, right, this is the guy.
Yeah.
There was this cultural alignment. What I really liked about him at the time was not only was he an engineer and incredibly technically talented, but he had been involved in the same business for 15 years, so there was a loyalty there. But he had also built and failed in a startup within the business that he was with.
Right.
So he understood what it was like to be an entrepreneur, and he wasn't like a CTO coming from an insurance company or a big bank. He had felt the pain of what it was like to build and hustle and build a business and fail, which I think was lessons that at least that we hadn't learned yet. So it was gold at the time.
It is such gold. I hear so many founders talk about the pain of trying to take this step of hiring a scalable leadership team, hiring somebody out of, from a corporate background, run big teams, big divisions, and it just doesn't work because they don't know how to operate in a messy, small environment that they've got to scale hands-on. And so what you're talking about is somebody you got who had experience in a corporate environment, but also experience in a smaller business context, very entrepreneurial, scrappy, and that combination enabled them to not only thrive in your environment, but also take your business to the next level.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's
amazing.
Exactly right. Yeah.
But I bet you he was expensive for you at that time.
Yeah, he was super expensive, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. But I remember the interview process. It was like a match made in heaven, and he was, Dov, I'm sold on the story. I want to get involved. I'm all in. But I have 3 kids at private school, and my run rate is X.
Yeah.
And I said, Dave, what is that run rate? And he told me, and I nearly fell off my chair because it was like so foreign to what we would be prepared to spend on a monthly basis on someone. And I said, Dave, let me go away and think about it. And I remember talking and getting counsel from my chairman at the time, who was part of the institutional shareholder who had bought into our business early. And he just like, Dov, you got to find the best people. And it was a 5-minute conversation. And I went back to Dave and I said, right, you're in. And for about 18 months thereafter, he was earning double than what I was earning as the CEO.
Yeah, it's a bitter pill. It's hard.
So it wasn't 20 or 30% more. It was 100% more than what I was earning. And in retrospect, it was the best decision we ever made.
I mean, you can be so grateful that you chose that version of expensive. I love the quote that says, if you think hiring professionals is expensive, you should try hiring amateurs. It's a lot more expensive. And unfortunately, it works out that way. When you're trying to scale and you get to the point where you need to build a scalable leadership team, and you just allow that affordability to make the decision for you, and you hire the leaders that you can afford at the wrong time. It is multiples. It's probably tens of times more expensive than just hiring the guy you needed and finding a way to make it work. Yeah.
And there was, it wasn't like I could convince Dave to take a view. We weren't giving him equity at the time. I think he even said to me at the time, it's not like I'm coming in and even asking for equity. Like, rather don't give me equity, but I cannot leave what I'm currently doing because I've got this monthly run rate.
Totally, yeah.
And, it was refreshing of him to be honest, and manage expectations. And, subsequently what's happened, if you fast forward to where we are today, is obviously the salaries have caught up and there's equilibrium between the management and leadership team, but he's now a shareholder in the business. So he's obviously proved himself up and is a fundamentally important part to the success of Merchant Capital, and is now a partner in the business. So, that's when, things really worked out well.
Yeah. So your story is one, it's a good news story, right? Where you made a courageous leap, difficult, costly, took a lot of bravery to make that decision, but it worked out really well. You picked, and it comes down to your selection. Yeah. You chose the right guy and you chose the right role to take that bet on. You were going from Fin with Wizard of Oz tech to real fintech, and you needed the leader that could take you where you couldn't.
Absolutely.
You needed to be able to scale beyond yourselves as founders, and that was the decision you were making, to scale beyond yourselves, which speaks to another aspect of this decision. It's not just the decision to hire somebody to pay a lot more than you have in the past. Actually, there's a decision about your relationship to this business, right? Because before that point where you start building a scalable leadership team around you, you as founders are the leadership. And now you're moving from being the leadership to building the leadership team that can take the business to the next level. Tell me about that inner journey, about how you navigated, the mindset shift around your role in the business, and essentially that, the degree to which you controlled every facet of the business as you started bringing in more senior leaders.
Yeah, and I think this is a kind of an inflection point for any leader, which in my mind is kind of the differentiator between success and failure. And I can just talk about me personally. You've asked for my personal experience. I've always been a person with very little ego. And my ego does not drive me from that perspective. So you'll have other leaders in similar positions to say, of course I can do everything. Yeah. Why would I go and hire someone, because my strengths are much, my weaknesses are minuscule compared to my strengths. I'm the kind of person that I could always be very honest with myself, sometimes soberingly honest, and just say, this is not where my skill set is. And you can actually get more leverage out of me by bringing in someone and me kind of giving away or delegating some of that experience or that responsibility that I may not be very good at. So as another example, a couple of years after Dave joined, we then hired Nicole Swart. She was more of a professional. She had been in banking and consulting for a number of years. And she had a lot of skills that I certainly didn't have. And we appointed her as the managing director of what we call the SME business, which really at the time and still is the core of our business. It's the majority of our revenue. And she became the MD.
Wow.
And I remained as the CEO. I mean, titles are actually relevant to us in the business, but she was the MD. And it was the best decision that we've ever made, because her skills in her ability to kind of oscillate between strategy, which obviously is the part that I'm involved with her, but then kind of oscillating with going down into the detail and processes and systems and incredible leadership and KPIs and management. That's the kind of stuff that I can do, but it's not my happy place.
Yeah.
And it was relevant or sufficient for the first 5-6 years of business. But as the team grew, as our business grew, as it became more and more complex, you needed someone that actually, that was their happy place and that was their strength. So here was me giving up the MD position, and her being the head of that business and ultimately making decisions, that ultimately I would be making previously. Yeah. And it actually freed me up to have capacity and some leverage in doing the things that I prefer to do, or really was my happy place.
Amazing. Such a moment of freedom. I mean, in the book Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, is the founder of the Entrepreneur Operating System, he talks about this exact pairing as the key, and that's why the book is called Rocket Fuel, the key to exponential scale. It's the pairing between the visionary founder, sounds like you're that profile, and what he calls the integrator. It's exactly the profile you described that your MD has, oscillating between strategy, but then actually spend a lot of time integrating the entire organization to embed and execute that strategy and keep all the divisions pulling together.
That's right.
And for many of us, I think I share aspects of your profile and also the visionary profile. We can force ourselves to do that because we tend to be high grit, do what it takes founders, but it's exhausting. It's not us in our happy place. And for many of our audience, they're also going to be visionary founders trying to muscle through that work. And it's possibly the most costly thing you're doing for yourself, for your business, for your family, because it's exhausting you and you're not able to operate at your point of peak contribution. So this decision is liberating for you and actually great for everybody else. Well done on making it. And it sounds like it's worked out amazingly well. Tell us a bit about how it's played out in terms of the role you've been able to play because you made that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also the trick, which obviously you wouldn't know at the time, is that it has to be a symbiotic relationship. So what I mean by that is Nikki being the MD, she doesn't want to be the rainmaker.
Yeah,
she doesn't want to do it. So like if she did, then you would almost land up in a couple of years with a problem because, she would ultimately want the CEO role or the role that I'm doing. So it's being able to have the EQ to be able to spot what actually is the happy place and how leverage you're going to get out of this particular leader and make sure that there's a synergistic cross-pollination ability to really leverage this thing.
Yeah.
So, that's, I guess, where we were fortunate. And there's no science to it because you don't know. What you don't know is you don't know. You only really figure that out, in kind of the fullness of time.
Yeah.
And what it allowed me to do was to really leverage the things that I'm good at and what the business needed. And that would be like the rainmaking, the big deals, the strategy, the culture, really being the leader, but not necessarily being involved in the minutiae of the detail of the operations every single day.
Yeah, amazing. For me, it was a liberating moment when I took a personality profiling tool called Wealth Dynamics by Roger Hamilton, and it told me I'm a creator and I should be doing stuff that's creating, producing, and not doing stuff that's managing, operating, governing. And realizing that actually the role I had was exactly the inverse of my strengths at the time was a liberating moment. And I tell you, liberating for my co-founders too, because I could ultimately adjust my role and start to play to my strengths. And so wonderful to see in your story how that, you seem to have that awareness, that ability to craft your role, to play to your strengths, and also craft the team around you to enable you to play to your strengths and them to play to theirs, which is amazing. Okay, so we've been talking quite a lot about scaling a leadership team as you scale, key enabler of scaling, and how that constrains you in the early years. And you've obviously over time been able to scale into a position where increasingly you've been able to afford the kind of leaders you need. But many people in our audience aren't there yet. They're still younger, earlier in their journey, and they're still facing those affordability constraints. And so what I want to dig into a little bit is the role that artificial intelligence could play in helping them address that constraint. But AI is quite new for most of us, and we're all pretty much trying to figure it out. So I wanted to get in a little bit to where are you on the AI journey? How are you seeing its role in your business? What are you experimenting with? And then let's mine a couple of nuggets for our audience, and then we'll move into some rapid fire questions just to give our audience 10 nuggets in like 100 seconds.
Sure. So first of all, as a disclaimer, I'm certainly not the authority on AI. So I think it's such a fluid environment at the moment. There is so much going on. The rate of change is actually astounding. So what we've tried to do as a business and a leadership team is just make sure that we are as well educated as to what is happening in the market and where it is relevant for our business. So that's kind of what we have done. We have used things, for example, like, as you know, you can outsource the coding. So we've got a relatively big tech team with lots of engineers and analysts and stuff like that. And what they would do was they would outsource it to like a dev house in Lithuania, as an example. You don't need to do that anymore. So we've run a project, a sprint, where we've actually outsourced it to AI, and we're currently testing it. So that could be a great way to save on capacity, time, and just make it more efficient. There's something else which has come up more recently, which is called agentic AI, which kind of looks at the customer user experience that our clients would be having. So whether that's through WhatsApp or through an AI bot or whatever that is, that's something that we're looking and testing at the moment. Because ultimately, and I'm not sure where you are, Jace, but I'm not using Google search anymore. You know, everything is done in ChatGPT. Now, we need to make sure that we are at the forefront of that. So if someone types into ChatGPT, I'm looking for an unsecured business loan, how do you make sure that you're ranking high? How do you make sure that you've got the ability to actually service that? Because as I said, the rate of change is just phenomenal. So we really are trying to be ahead of the curve, but at the same time, just trying to stick to our knitting and not be too presumptuous as to where we think this can revolutionize the business, but not have our heads in the sands either. And that's really kind of the balancing act that I think most business owners, you know, that I've at least spoken to. And we attend seminars, and I know you're having something in a couple of weeks, which we'll be at, which is hugely interesting and exciting. So I think make sure that you're getting all the information in, and then make a decision as to how that is relevant to you and your business.
Yeah, I think that's so wise, Dov. I think, you know, most honest founders would have to say, we're not experts. Like, we're actually just trying to take a breath, you know, in the midst of all these headlines. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but just today, ChatGPT launched an update to something that's coming soon. We'll literally make purchases in your chat, in your ChatGPT thread, powered by Stripe. So you search for something you're looking for, it pops up as a picture, you say, buy this now, and it takes you through your payment flow live in your chat thread. Anthropic just launched their 4.5 model that now does slide decks better than most people.
Wow.
It's extraordinary, the rate of change. And the thing is, while AI is quite bad at a lot of things and very disappointing in many regards, it is the worst it's ever going to be right now. It's only going to get better, and it's going to get better exponentially. And so the wisdom in what you shared is we're keeping ourselves well educated and exploring the possibilities with balance.
That's it.
We're not getting trapped by the hype and, you know, going all into something we don't yet understand, but we're certainly not ignoring it. We're actively picking our experiments, and then we're seeing what really works. And we're surrounding ourselves with people who know what they're talking about and can guide us. And I think there's huge wisdom in that. There's one particular facet of what AI offers that I want to bring to the table in light of the discussion we had today on scaling, because we really dipped into one of the 12 key laws of scaling, which is the law of people. You don't build a company, you build a team, and they build a company. And you can only do that with A players. But the constraint you hit is, you know, you have the team often that you can afford rather than one you need. And in particular, as you scale and go through life cycle stage evolutions, you start needing a different A team to the one you used to have. And that constraint is painful. And I think that is where AI brings something truly revolutionary to the table for scale-ups. Because if you look at Ethan Mollick's work in his book, Co-Intelligence, I recommended this book to you. I highly recommend this book to every founder. What he describes is how AI, and here I'm talking about generative AI, LLM tools like ChatGPT, how if you use them right, if you build the right co-pilots for your knowledge workers, managers, leaders, they literally collapse experience and expertise gaps. It enables young green talent that's just smart, curious, and humble to operate 2 or 3 levels above their pay grade if you just pair them with the right team of AI co-pilots. And I've seen this for myself in our current team in Art of Scale. We're doing this right now and seeing literally transformative results around what one person can deliver. And I'm not talking about outputs. I'm not talking about tasks. I'm not talking about process efficiency. I'm talking about ability to think strategically, to architect systems that would require 10 years more experience than the person has, and to do it pretty darn well. It's really transformative. But the fact is that it's all pretty new and we're all still learning.
Figuring it out.
So I think the big insight, Dov, that I want the audience to take away from what you shared is stay curious, stay active, stay experimenting, and stay surrounded by people who are on the frontier and who can point you to what would be valuable in your setting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Cool. Let's do some rapid fire. So I want to give the audience some nuggets from your immense experience now scaling up. So let's go through a couple of questions.
Sure.
Quick. What book are you reading right now?
I'm reading the Soul Kerzner book. It's a fantastic, in fact, I've just finished it, but it's a fantastic book around South Africa entrepreneurship who went global.
Yeah.
And just his ability to never take no for an answer. And, notwithstanding all the challenges that he had. And, you go visit these places like Sun City now and the Beverly Hills and, Atlantis at the Palms. It's just phenomenal that this is a South African entrepreneur who had such a vision, against the odds.
Yeah.
It's a real great story about grit, entrepreneurship, perseverance, and never saying no, which are kind of the 4 or 5 things you need to be a successful entrepreneur. So I highly recommend the Soul Kerzner book.
Amazing. What one book would you recommend most to founders who are about to scale or starting to deal with growing pains from scaling?
Ooh, that's a big one, Jace. There's a couple. There's one which I've shared with my team often. It's called The Essentialist or Essentialism. It's by Greg McKeown. It's the art of saying no.
Yeah.
Now, I think as an early stage founder, even
Very
today,
good.
how difficult it is not to say yes to everything, because there's opportunities and everything's coming at you and you want to do everything. The actual real secret to success is the art to triage those opportunities and then actually know when to say no, because it allows you to say yes to the right thing. So I think there was a sequel to the book. I did read it. I can't remember what it was called. But the first one, which was called Essentialism by Greg McKeown, I think is a cheat sheet for founders and entrepreneurs who are trying to build a business.
Amazing. Your favorite quote?
I heard it actually on a podcast recently. I don't know who said it, but it was something along the lines of how you do anything is how you do everything. It was on a podcast with the founder of Shopify. Apologies. Yeah. And I just loved that because, even if you can't do that little thing properly, don't do it, because that scales into how you do everything. The other one, which I do know who said, which I also use quite a lot with my team, is pleased but never satisfied. And that is Michael Dell. So that's a cultural thing. Like you can be pleased but never accept. Always keep raising that benchmark. Never be satisfied. Keep growing. Keep breaking through that glass ceiling. That's one that I really, really enjoy.
Amazing. The hardest bottleneck moment you faced in your scale-up journey?
I think it actually talks to what we were talking about as the thematically about this podcast. Having the intuition and the gut feel to say, this is the time to bring in CTO or MD or whatever it is. But at the same time, financially being able to take that leap of faith. So I think that for us at least, it was the unblocking that and being able to make those decisions at the right time. And we certainly haven't got it right all the time, but that has really helped us scale, because you've scaled the leadership team that has invariably helped scale the business.
The single most important decision you took that unlocked scale?
I think it was that. It was exactly that. It was the ability to have the timing right and when to bring in the level of leadership that was needed in order to get the leverage out of the skills and weaknesses of the current leadership team.
The most important piece of advice you've received as a founder?
There's no such thing as a silver bullet. I think the success of a business and the failure of a business is, the equivalent of a death by 1,000 cuts. It's the little incremental things that you're doing every single day that actually compound and create exponential scale. So you've sometimes got these business owners and founders who are looking for the one thing, the next client, the big partnership, the new product. Those things are always important, but it's actually the little things. It's the compounding of the incremental growth that helps.
And that's the one thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Most overrated advice you've heard as a founder?
I'm going to pass on that one.
Pass. If starting Merchant Capital today, knowing what you know today, what one thing would you do differently?
I don't think there's anything I would do differently. And perhaps that is a privilege, and I hope it doesn't come across to the listeners as being complacent or arrogant. But I guess the Merchant Capital journey has been the journey.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that kind of sticks out where I would say, I think we really messed up there. And don't get me wrong, we've made hundreds of mistakes, but those mistakes have almost been the catalyst for an inflection point in the business, or to change or pivot or do something differently. So actually, in short, I would change nothing.
Warts and all, made you what you are. Yeah. Amazing. So Dov, kudos to you and your team. And I know one man doesn't build a business, a man and his team. So to you and your team, you've done amazing things. And I know it's just the beginning. So I expect to see you 10x and then 100x. And I'm excited for that. So congratulations to you. Thanks for joining the show. I mean, you've added huge value to our audience. I want to just distill a couple of things that we can take away from what we've shared. Your story speaks to a couple of the timeless principles of scaling. The first is life cycle stages. What got you here won't get you there. You may have had a real A team, but when you scale a bit further, you actually need a slightly different A team. So what got you here won't get you there. Secondly, the power of an A team. You just don't build a company. You build a team and they build the company, and you need an A team to do that. But because of the law of life cycle stages, what an A team looks like, shape and size changes over time. You've got to have that read as a founder of when you need to be shifting to the team that will take you to the next level. And then thirdly, founder's mindset. You can only do that when you have the right mindset towards your business, when you are able to separate yourself from the business and have no ego and, give over real authority and control to other leaders. I like to say, to retain control, you've got to give away control. It's the only way you can keep having control over a growing company, is to give it to other leaders. So well done. Thank you for sharing these timeless principles with our leaders, and look forward to seeing you going from strength to strength.
Thank you, Jess. It's been such a pleasure and real fun chatting. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Dov. Take care.